Hi, everybody. I'm John Sell. Welcome to Lunch and Learn. It's Tuesday. Yes, December 10th. My gosh, how many shopping days left to Christmas? We're delighted you're with us today. This is a program we did last Friday on Career Live, and we had a lot of feedback and questions. And several people asked us if we could repeat it today. And so we are, because I think this is an important subject. And when you look at how many people get the job but then don't last 2 years, this is an important program and an important set of questions you need to be aware of, and you need to be not afraid to ask. If you have questions, we're monitoring the chat box, so just drop it in, especially if you're on YouTube. It comes right over to us directly. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. We're delighted to answer them any way we can. This Friday, we're going to have a presentation on, so you want to get a doctorate. Will that help your career? What's the return on investment? And we'll talk about that and the fact that people accumulate a slew of certifications. Does that help advance your career? We'll talk about that on Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time on something called Career Live. Today, we're going to focus on how to protect yourself in the job interview. A lot of people are very, very reluctant to ask pointed questions during the job interview. And I will tell you, a lot of them say, well, I don't want to come across as being rude. I don't want to come across as being overly aggressive. I don't want to come across as someone who is going to be a problem employee. And typically, let me just say this, people who are really comfortable with themselves and who understand their value are less likely to be afraid of those questions. The key here is to understand that interviewing is a two-way street. And so let's get into that, and let's see if we can provide you some insight on how to protect your career. And the big idea, it is a two-way street. And I will tell you, there's a reason that applicants are asked, do you have any questions? Excuse me, mold spores are upon us again. But they're asked that question. Sometimes it is just to see what questions you will ask, and they don't really care. And there are employers out there that do that. But there are a lot of other times where they are genuinely concerned about things that you want to know about, whether you've misunderstood something, whether you have concerns about something. And so there's a general desire. So if you don't ask any questions, that's really on you, and it's not a really good positive thing either. So you want to always have questions prepared, and not just the obvious ones. Think about, if you were in that job, what would you want to know before you accepted that job? So the big idea today, interviewing is a two-way street. Now, this can be a really uplifting experience. Earlier in my career, I didn't understand the process, and people would call me and they'd go to all this thing, and you're really great, and they'd flatter me and all that other stuff, and then they wouldn't hire me. And I went, what the hell's going on? You guys call me. Why did you waste my time? Well, I didn't understand the process. And the process is they're going to try to get a bunch of people together that they think might be interesting and qualified. And then they want to flatter you and keep you in the fold, much like a bull moose elk will, and to keep his female people in his little group so that he doesn't have to lose out on any interlopers. So there's that territorial issue. Well, that's what recruiters do. They're going to tell you what they think you want to know, and then they're going to evaluate you. If they don't need you, they're going to push you out, hopefully politely, hopefully with some feedback, but probably not. But there's more to this uplifting experience that it's good for your ego, okay? But the process is fraught with career risk, and I'm not talking about getting turned down. The career risk are, anytime you're looking for a job, your present boss could find out about it. Somebody says something someplace that's so innocent, and yet it gets back. And so you want to be careful. I know recruiters are very, very concerned about confidentiality, but things do happen. So there's always that risk. And I apologize again, my allergies. Every time I go on live stream, it's like the allergies descend up on me. So there's always a possibility that could leak out. But the other more dangerous aspect of this is that you could be wooed into, get excited about the wrong job for you, in the wrong company for you. 40% of newly recruited executives are pushed out, or they quit within 18 months. Now, first of all, let's just acknowledge right up front there's a 5,000-pound elephant in this room, and that is that recruiters sometimes view this transactional because they don't have a lot of skin in the game other than their reputation. Stuff happens. Now, this is an industry-wide statistic, and the bad news is this number hasn't changed that much since the mid-1990s when the advisory board first reported on it. Now there's multiple research sites looking at it, and the numbers are a little better in some areas, a little worse in others. But 18 months is what was the original focus. There was a article on the then CEO of Hadrick and Struggles. He moved on, and he acknowledged that that was a problem that their firm was concerned with. That they were a high price white shoe firm based in Chicago. They did the CEO search for Home Depot and or let's see, they did it for 3M and also from, I think it was Home Depot or Lowe's, and the fee was $1 million for each one. And they were two people that did not make the final cut at GE. And so, the CEO of Hydrick and Struggles knew those were both his clients. He made $2 million in fees in 2 or 3 different days. What they don't want to tell you is that it's transactional. And so they want somebody that the client's going to like, that's going to meet the client's expectations. But then there's that whole issue of culture. And recruiters aren't going to really get into that because they don't want to be liable for saying something that's not true or saying something they misunderstood or upsetting the client because they don't want to lose the client. It's all about new business. It's not all about keeping clients, and it's all about the bonus, and it's all about the fee. So as a recruiter, as a recruitee, you have to be very, very careful because the recruiter is not necessarily looking out for your best interest. Matter of fact, that's probably a safe statement. On the other hand, what the recruiter may do is push you out the door before you get the job if they don't think if the client doesn't like you. It's very rarely the recruiter is going to say, no, we're going to eliminate this guy. They're going to let the client do that. And so you have to be very vigilant. I mean, extremely vigilant in terms of when you start into the interview process to be sure you're asking the right questions. And that's what this presentation today is all about. Now, your questions, they are so critical, and they can be the linchpin in whether you're going to be successful or not. So this is something that requires thoughtfulness, intentionality, and you have to be ready to ask those questions and not be shy about it. Why do people sometimes afraid to ask questions? Because they have this imposter syndrome. They don't believe they're really worthy. And people say, no, I'm very successful. Feeling worthy and being successful are two different things. And so when you're getting ready to go into a search, if you're dealing with a coach or an advisor on interviewing, be sure that you get their help and get them to push you. If you're not going to ask the tough questions, you're probably not going to succeed in the job. So let's see what happens. You get that phone call, Roger, John, hey, you've been selected for a screening interview. This is when you can start asking questions. Okay. And that is, with the questions you want to ask, who will conduct the screening? And then go to their LinkedIn profile and copy the picture and then talk to the picture when this screening occurs. Look at where they've worked. Look at where fraternities or sororities they were members of. Look at where they went to school, the whole 9 yards, and look for things that you can connect with in their background that you can use to build connection. Now, the second thing you want to ask, is how long will the call last? And you need to know that for planning purposes. Sometimes the calls are scheduled for 20 minutes. Well, if they're 20 minutes, you're going to have to answer a lot of questions very quickly. And they have a script they're going through, so don't get carried away. You're not going to get points for making the call go over time, okay? Sometimes they do. Sometimes the recruiter just enjoys talking to you, okay? They talk to people all day long, and sometimes you can just hit a chord and talk a long time and have a great time. That doesn't mean that you're going to get it pushed in the career up to the next level. It means they had a good time and enjoyed talking with you. That you want to also ask, are you retained? Are you corporate? Are you a contingency? Now, the corporate recruiter he or she is under a lot of pressure because they are time to hire, cost to hire, all of those things, quality of hire. The retained recruiter is going to have a lot of information on the client. They will probably spend 1 to 2 days in a due diligence visit asking about how the job is going to be structured and who the reporting relationships will be to, and what are the expectations for success. And oh, by the way, what are a couple of sentences you can give me about your culture, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The corporate recruiter and the retained recruiter will more than likely, 95% certainty, they're going to know about the culture and the organization more than a contingency recruiter will. Now, a contingency recruiter, you're going to run in, if you're a management level person, you're going to run into these people more frequently than you do when you become an executive, because you'll deal with corporate recruiters and retained recruiters at that level. Contingency recruiters are people that do recruiting, but they're working on a very specific timeline. If they don't get the candidate they want in first, in other words, if they find 3 good candidates and one of those 3 is hired, if they were the first person to submit them, they'll get paid. Otherwise, they don't. And so there's a real sense of speed and a sense of urgency to get you screened as quickly as possible, and hope you don't ask too many questions that they might take themselves out, because they don't want to screen you and then have you withdraw. So you have to understand that some contingency recruiters may not tell you what you need to hear about the culture, or about performance expectations, or about turnover, or what happened to the last person in this job. And if you start hearing, I don't know, you'll need to ask the client that. You need to, that more than likely you're talking to a contingency recruiter. They're great people. There's some people who do good work as contingency recruiters, but they don't really know that much about the client unless they've done a lot of work for them. So if they are contingency, say, how many searches have you done for this company? If it's only 1 or 2, your radar needs to go on high alert, because you're going to have to be asking a lot of the questions that will keep you from making a mishire, and it'll all be up to you. So you've got 3 kinds of recruiters: corporate, retained, and contingency. Corporate, they're employed by the company or an outsourcing company. A retained firm is usually an independent search firm, and they are paid a retainer up front, and they're guaranteed their fee regardless of how the candidate is sourced and hired. They are basically working as consultants. When the final thing you want to ask in this notification call, describe the process and the anticipated decision date. That's really important to know that up front, so that you're not having to ask later, and B, you can kind of track to see where you stand. If you're not getting callbacks and we're getting close to key deadlines, then that may tell you something. Now, you get into the screening interview. This interview is going to last between 20 and 40 minutes. Be focused, be prepared. Think about what you've learned in that first screening call. What did they tell you? And if they didn't tell you much, or it's not really actionable intel, then you need to be sure you pick up in this interview and find out what you didn't find out in the first interview. Why is the job vacant? What was the tenure of the predecessor for this position? Tell me, what are the key challenges, and what's the comp range for the organization? Now, I want to stop here and say this is really important, because you'd be surprised how many people, including some executives, who get down to the final job and discover that the comps range is well below what they're currently making. So why would you go to all the work and all the risk of being in a search and not know that it's going to be a step forward for you? So if they won't tell you, or they can't tell you, that's a big yellow flag, maybe even a red flag. And you just say, well, get back to me and let me know, and I'll be happy to visit with you some more. If you're really a good candidate, they really want you, they're going to figure out some way to get you the information. If they don't know, or if they don't care, that's fine. You didn't probably need to work there anyway. But don't get into, thick into the interview process without knowing what the comp range is. Now, here's a little tip. If they ask you, what do you expect? Just say, well, if the comp range is 200,000 to 250, based on my past experience and my accomplishments, I would expect to be in the 75th percentile. If they want to come in and lowball you, hey, you have to then be confident about what your value is, and you have to stand up for your value. And if they don't want to pay you for your value, then that may not be a place for you to work. But you got to know the comp range. So all right, let's pick up where we left off. What's the job? Why is the job vacant? That's important. Did the person get fired? Then you need to source out, when you can, probably not in this call, why did the person get fired? What was the tenure of the person? Has there been a lot of turnover? What are the key challenges this person will face if they are hired? What's the comp range? Those are very important questions because they're going to speak to culture and the stability of the organization. The next thing you want to ask is, to whom will I report? Tell me about that person. What's their, how do they make decisions? What do they like in a direct report? How long have they been in that role? And then you also finally want to ask, are there any internal candidates? Now, frequently you'll be told yes, and hopefully most of the time that's true. Sometimes you will be told no, and there will be internal candidates. And recruiters are loath to tell you information that might drive you away from the panel because they are being evaluated on the quality of the panel of candidates they're presenting. So you want to have to ask this question, but sometimes you also have to understand that they're not necessarily going to be truthful with you or completely disclose what's going on. That's a question when you get into additional interviews, either on the phone, on the video, or on site, that you ask some of the members of the interviewing team that you're going to be talking to. All right, so those are some really important questions, and that'll set the table for your search. More questions you should ask, and this is in the first in-depth interview. This is where you say, tell me about the culture and values. Now, you can ask that in the screening interview. You can certainly ask it on the front end. What is the culture? Because this is what shoots people in the foot. If you don't survive 40%, the 40% that left before 2 years, okay, they left more than likely because there was a cultural mismatch. Okay. Tell me about the culture and values of the organization. Listen carefully, take notes, whatever you need to do to remember. And if they're very vague, say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. That's interesting. Oh, tell me more. You want to get them to talk about this as much as possible because they may inadvertently raise the red flag for you, and you need to walk away from that search. If you're anxious about getting a job and you've gone through a lot of searches and you're scared to death you're never going to work again, you have to put that in the closet, okay? You really do, because when people get into trouble, they didn't ask those questions because they didn't want to do anything that would screw it up. They didn't want to lose the job opportunity. So they will just keep their mouth shut, and then they get into the position and find out, holy crap, what a big a pile of cow. You know what? So this question is so important. And if people get offended by this question, that you need to stop and say, are these people I really need to work for? Okay. Then you want to talk about, what are the key challenges? What's the turnover rate? And how will my performance be evaluated? These are all very fair, legitimate questions. And you'd be surprised how many times people do not ask them. And then they're very surprised when they take the job. And that's what this is all about. A lot of times when candidates get surprised, it's because they didn't ask the right questions. Okay. Do clients, I say clients because I was a recruiter for such a long time, do employers lie about the position or lie about certain other things? Absolutely. Just as people open their mouth and speak. Not every time that happens, but it is very, very common. So you just need to keep your ears open, listen for consistency, and ask multiple people the same types of questions, preferably not in the same interview. So tell me about your culture and values. So critical, very rarely asked in interviews. What's the turnover rate? Again, very, very critical, not always asked. Why is that? Because organizations just don't like to talk about turnover. And if they're not tracking it or they can't tell you, that's may not be a red flag, but it's certainly becoming a yellow flag. And you need to really explore that and be sure, not just make yourself comfortable. You need to be sure you get the data that helps you becoming comfortable. Fine. Number 4 is, how will my performance be evaluated? You absolutely have to know that. That allows you to really assess the situation and listen for consistency and listen for reasonableness. These are all things that can create big problems for you. Describe the package. Again, even though you may have been told the range the first time, get more information. Describe the package as generic or just nebulous enough that somebody may tell you something that they might not ordinarily say. So what's the package, and what you're listening for is what I'm being told consistent. Okay. If I'm advanced, this is when you start wrapping up this first in-depth interview. What are the next steps? That's a very legitimate question, and always be sure that that you're taking notes, and make mental notes and physical notes about all of these answers, particularly if I'm advanced, what are the next steps? Because that can help refresh your memory. If you haven't heard anything in 2 or 3 weeks, they can go back and look at your notes. Okay. Again, we go back. This may be the third interview. It may be the final interview. Now, we have a course on how to do these interviews and how to be successful and how to build trust and confidence with the employer. And we'd like to invite you to take a look at it. It is on our webpage at johngself.com. On the right-hand side of the homepage, there's a banner, and that banner, you click that, and it takes you to our membership page, and there is a course there called the Comprehensive Interview. I think the course, it's like 8 weeks, 5 mock interviews. It's about $1,425. Now, for our subscribers, people in our Guiding Your Career community, they can get that fee reduced by 40% for being a member. It's $200 a registration fee and $79 a month. And you've got to finish the course while you're a member, or the course stops, or you'll have to pay a higher fee. So we try to help people with the finances and that sort of thing. That's just one of the options you have. Why is this position open? Very important. Are there any internal candidates? These are questions you want to ask again to be sure you're being told a consistent answer. How would you describe the culture of the organization or unit? And if they're not specific, just say, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more." Keep things in perspective. And if they're not answering these questions, just if you're not getting a lot of detail, tell me more. That's so interesting. Okay. Are there any morale or turnover issues? And that's important, because a lot of turnover is going to result in a lower bottom line. Okay. A lot of people don't like to talk about it, but it's absolutely the case. And if the organization has a lot of turnover, why? What happened that, why are there so many, people leaving? Why would I want to join an organization with so many people leaving? Maybe it's a toxic organization. Maybe it's dysfunctional supervisor. Maybe it's a dysfunctional manager in that division. And then finally, you need to know how the financial position of the organization is. What is it? Facing any significant financial challenges? I remember joining Herman Hospital in Houston in the mid 1970s. I gave up a pretty secure job as a night crime reporter and investigative journalist for the Houston Post. And I remember looking out on the on one of the patios at the hospital, seeing these temporary vehicles, because there was a big construction project going on. And you ask all these people, what's that? Oh, that's where we have these people that are contract, because we had to fire a bunch of our people. Okay, I didn't know the organization was in financial trouble until I asked that question about why those temporary buildings were out in the parking lot. How would you describe the financial picture of the organization that you're seeking employment with? You have a right to know that, and you need to listen for consistency. Okay, number 5, if you do a site interview, and again, that's up in the air. Sometimes people now are doing all their offering and all their interviewing online, just like we are today. I'm not a big fan of that, because I think sometimes video can really put a big time filter on what you're seeing and hearing and what you feel. I got pretty good at it because I did numerous searches during the pandemic where I had to use video, and so I developed some skills to do that. But most people don't have those skills. So, as a candidate, you have to take the initiative, and you have to have good lighting and good visuals and good audio. Okay, and you need to pay attention to how you look and what's the background like, and anything like that. But as a recruiter, I can't tell you how many crazy things I've heard and seen people just miss because they weren't paying attention. And it's those little things that get you eliminated. One of the things you want to ask in this interview is, tell me about the people I'll interact with, in order to succeed. What kind of people are they? What percent of the management team is homegrown? That means they came up within the organization and they're organically placed. Okay, that's important. What percent of your management team, and then what percent of your leadership team? Sometimes those are two different groups. Is this a new position? Why was it created? Okay, who in the organization is really truly affected by, the structure of the organization and the leadership teams. And if this is a new position, sometimes they take departments away from other people to try to create a more cohesive, efficient organization chart, and that means somebody along the way, a leadership peer, might have lost some departments, which they might view as lost prestige. So you have to be really careful to find out on the front end, who are the winners and the losers in the organization. The losers are going to be people you have to keep an eye on. Okay, in healthcare, this is true, but it's also true in petrochemicals and in hospitality. Add on, add on, add on. Okay. Are there any quality, service, or regulatory issues? Okay. What you don't want to do is get involved in an organization that's struggling because they have, hit and miss medical, compliance issues. Their financials aren't very good and they're just sloppy. You don't want to do that. So you want to ask, are there any quality, service, or regulatory issues? And then in the side interview, before you go, you want to say, what, with the people who are very successful here, kind of highlight in template fashion, what made them successful in terms of the qualities they brought to the table. Okay. Really good and important question. Okay. So always be sure that you ask that as well. Now, there are going to be times, intentionally or otherwise, where your questions will go unanswered. And it's, as I said, a variety of reasons: lack of knowledge regarding the policy, regarding, sometimes organizations really have a set policy in recruiting: who says what to who and when and why and what, okay, whatever all that means. Never, if you're trying to get information and they're pushing back on you, never confront, never be very aggressive. It's just absolutely, you just need to shift gears and be polite, but continue to probe. Okay. Ask them, if you're going for a final interview, you're probably going to go to see 4 or 5 people during the day. Some of the things that you're not sure about or that you haven't gotten answers to, kind of very innocuously ask, well, did you ever find about this or that? That is, ask them, ask them the question. Let me put it a different way. Ask for their input, about culture, about turnover rates, about challenges, about if they interact with this department or division that you're taking over, what's been the problems in the past and why did it take so long to rectify them, or what happened to the last person here, or et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And the final interview is also an opportunity to really clarify any issues and get any outstanding questions answered. There's really, you're just treading with disaster if you take the position is, okay, I got this, I don't need to ask any more questions. First of all, it's going to be a big black mark against you. But even if you have all the charming, if you've asked if they're not telling you the truth, okay, if you're not getting the truth, you want to try to clarify that. Generally, the last interview is going to be with the hiring manager or somebody pretty senior in the organization. So you might want to say, I'm really confused about this. Would you explain this to me? Don't hold back. Don't have one of these imposter moments that think you're unworthy to be there, so you're not going to ask these questions. Don't have an imposter moment where you say, to yourself, I'm not really worthy, so I'm not going to ask these questions because I don't want to piss them off and lose the job. That's just ridiculous. Don't go down that path. All righty. Now, when you're going through the job process, it's usually started, you either got laid off, and sometimes you're happily employed, but you're looking for the next step up. And those are great things. But sometimes, you get into a situation where you get laid off, or worse, you get fired for whatever reason. Sometimes a journey that can lead to amazing transformation in your career and in your life, begins with turmoil. It begins with a layoff, or it begins with tough economic times. Okay. When you thinking about being interviewed, you're thinking about taking the next step, you want to ask, Are you satisfied with your career? Really? What are you going to do? What do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do with your career? You know, do you want to just talk about your dreams or ideas? Or are you going to take action? And if you're going to take action, then you need to go into this recruiting process with a plan on what things that you want to stress and what things you want to kind of shy away from. And it really will be driven by the number of accomplishments you've achieved and some of the places where you've worked. So, are you going to talk about it? Or are you going to act on it? That's a key issue that comes up before you make this decision to even get in a search. Now, transformation is not a bad thing. A lot of people, will go through a positive, incredible, transformational part of their career after something bad has happened. But if that has happened, then you need to stop and think about your dreams, your vision, and your goals. What do you want? And be really specific in your thoughts and what you really want. Okay, this is the conversation between you and yourself. Now, one of the other problems, if you're going to go into this and be recruited, understand that your problems and your doubts are going to invade your brain. So you absolutely have to really be really careful and really kind of clear your brain of any negative thoughts. If you focus on problems, you're just going to end up with more problems. Okay, don't let that stuff invade your brain. Okay, if you're just kind of biding your time and you're waiting for the next big deal, you can get kind of frustrated and cynical. You got to clean all that garbage out. Why? Because your brain remembers it, and it will guide. Your brain's going to push you in that direction. So be positive. And when you're trying to be positive, imagine your future success. What is the job that they're recruiting me for? What does that look like? How am I going to feel about that? Or if it's another position, is this really what you want to do? Are you excited about it? And if you are, take the first step. Don't wait for everything to play out. Don't wait to say, well, I'm going to look for a better job when this, and this happens. That'll take about 5 years. Don't wait 5 years. Start thinking about what your bright future looks like today, and then start acting on it today. Okay. You may not be able to take the ultimate position you want for 4 or 5 years, but if you really think that this is something that you want to do, then go ahead and start committing yourself to this. It's all about conscious creation. It's all about, having a positive attitude. Your transformation, transforming your personal life. Again, it's your dreams, it's your vision and goals. What do you want? And as I said a minute ago, get very specific and write it down. Sound like a career plan? Certainly could be. Stop letting today, and that's your problems, your doubts, all the hurdles that you build around yourself that goes, well, maybe this is not the right time, or maybe this or that. Look, if there are issues about the job that concern you, that's fine. But if they're your fears, have a talk with yourself. If you're too afraid to go after the job, then don't. Okay. But don't go after the job and let all the negative stuff invade your brain, because your brain's going to be listening, and it's not going to pay off in a really appropriate way. It's not going to be beneficial to you. Imagine your future successes. Think about what you want to do 10 years from now or 15 years from now. And now just start taking the steps today. Don't wait to the future. We can help you. I specialize in helping people kind of get a grip on their future, to examine what they're doing and where they're going, and is this the right move for you? And then we can help get you prepared for the be to be competitive. Right now, at the end of the year, this is a good time to kind of sort through where you are and where do you want to go. There is an enormous white collar recession. And so, if you're going to go into the job market to advance your career, you really have to be very deliberate, very intentional, and understand that even if you start at January 1st, it's probably going to take you into 2026 before you actually land a new job, unless you get really lucky. It's taking 8 to 14 months, 8 to 14 months. So if you start in mid-January, it could be November, December, or the following January, February before you land that next job. In order to be successful, you have to be extremely well prepared, and you have to really bring your A game to interviewing. So if you have some issues and concerns about that, visit our website at johngself.com and take a look at all the courses we offer and all the coaching we provide. And if you become a member, all of those courses, including the interviewing course that's $1,450, you get 40% off of that fee. If you take one of our comprehensive outplacement courses, they range in cost from 4 or 5,000 to 12 to 14,000. Get 40% off of those as well. So that's for our members. And we're trying to build a community. People who are looking for a job. This kind of really competitive environment, because of the fewer number of jobs than we have people looking, is not going to go away anytime soon. So in order for you to achieve your career goals, you really have to be very intentional. We can help you get there. We can help you get to that next better job. Now, there's no office hours tomorrow afternoon. I'll be traveling, but we will be back here live Friday morning at 11 a.m. And we'll be talking about, does having a PhD or a doctor in public health or a doctor in accounting or doctor in whatever, does that help advance your career? And if so, in what areas? And also, how many credentials does one person really need? We'll talk about the return on investment for education and credentialing at 11 a.m. Central Time on Friday and on Career Live. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you Friday morning at 11 a.m. And if you want to see a replay of this, it'll be on YouTube and our Facebook page later today. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon.